Zionism is a colonial ideology which achieved its ends by terrorism and ethnic cleansing.
That's right.
Makes a complete mockery of the moral principles and ethical values.
And confusing the two has been Zionism's perhaps its greatest success.
With media complicity.
With media complicity, yes. If you, a journalist who would write that there is an Israeli point of view, yes, there's no doubt that Zionism has entered the body politic and entered the cultural life of Israel. Of course it has. How could it not after all these years? But there is a clear division, and the division which any journalist, I believe, worth his or her salt in trying to get across the truth of the Middle East would make that distinction.
Most Arabs and other Muslims and some Gentiles assert, quote, the Jews control the media, unquote. I think the real problem is self-censorship. And I believe that's the most invidious, most awful form of censorship.
Yeah, self-censorship, though, suggests that it's a conscious thing. Going back to what I said originally, when you enter an institution, when you become part of an institution, whether you're a teacher or a student or a journalist, you do internalize quite a lot. That's happened to all of us in some form. I believe it happens to journalists. Self-censorship suggests that people are saying, I'd like to report the truth of that, but I can't possibly do that because it will cause me all this grief. Now that does happen, but I think the greatest form of censorship, the most virulent form, is almost a subconscious acceptance.
But John, that to me is scary because I don't see any way out of that.
Well, yes, there are ways out of it. People, I think, I've never known in my career a time when the media has become such an issue for the public.
That's true.
When I do public meetings on a whole range of subjects or show a film, I would guess that the majority of questions from the audience are about the media. That was not true 15 years ago.
Is part of the proof of this that newspaper circulation is falling, television audiences are falling? Does this indicate that more and more people are becoming as fed up with the media as they are with politicians?
I think they're becoming fed up for some of the reasons that we're speaking about, actually.
Yeah.
I think what happened in Lebanon in '96, that the truth almost burst past its barriers onto the television screen, that the atrocious assault and dismantling of that country, I think, educated a large number of people. And I believe for quite a long time that there is a critical public intelligence in many countries, in countries where there isn't a, quote, free media, in countries where people have their backs to the wall, who live on the edge, unlike in Britain. But certainly in Britain, there is a critical public intelligence that finds out. That's been my experience as a correspondent over the years.
John, last question, quick answer. Imagine you're in a big conference hall. It's filled with all of the major editorial figures from the Western media world. You have an opportunity to give them a very short message. What would it be?
I would appeal to them that if they want to be remembered as truth tellers, as journalists, not merely as corporate functionaries, then they have to make themselves heard. They have to make their journalism felt. You know, I'm not sure I'd accept that invitation, Alan, to do it, because whereas, as we've spoken about people power, I'm not at all cynical about people. I am deeply cynical about those who try to control them, and those who run the media, and those who ensure that a kind of propaganda pours out. However, I've worked in the British mainstream media all my life. I think I've put in a lot of time trying to stay in the mainstream media and not go over to the margins. That's very important. And I know a lot of people who I think would respond to an appeal that they be true journalists, that they be true broadcasters. It's not a monolith. The media is made up of human beings, and within that there are people who actually believe that they belong to a craft, and that craft is telling the truth.
The basis of any truly civilized society, John said, is truth and justice. And those in any state or region who withhold justice are guilty of one of the great crimes. We didn't need to quote the great criminal tribunals like Nuremberg, he said, because there was natural justice. The right to speak out, the right to live properly, the right to bring up children, and the right to a life of decency, knowledge and opportunity. And those who are denying people these natural rights are committing perhaps the greatest crime of all. As John rightly pointed out, Israel is by no means the only criminal state in our world as it is. But also true is that Zionism's denial of justice for the Palestinians is the root cause of the conflict in and over Palestine. And the mainstream media's complicity in Zionism's suppression of the truth of history goes a long way to explaining why the conflict has remained and seems set to remain beyond the reach of politics and diplomacy. That's all for this week. From this heart to yours, good night.